The Indoraptor, arguably the most efficient hybrid predator ever created, made its terrifying debut in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Engineered by the brilliant Dr. Henry Wu, this genetically enhanced creature was built for one purpose, this being war. Designed to be the ultimate weapon, it combines the most lethal traits from multiple species, creating a monster unlike anything the prehistoric world had ever seen. However, what if it were thrown into that very world? Would it dominate the ancient landscapes of the Mesozoic, or would the world's natural organisms prove too much for even this engineered nightmare? There's only one way to find out, but before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe as it means the world. Anyways, the Indoraptor's DNA is primarily derived from the Indominus rex, but its velociraptor ancestry is significantly amplified, giving it heightened intelligence, agility, and predatory instincts. With the Indominus rex came solid size, standing at approximately 3.1 meters or 10 feet tall when on two legs. The Indoraptor also measures around 7 meters or 23 feet in length and weighs in at around 998 kilograms or 2,200 pounds. Despite its considerable size, the Indoraptor exhibits both remarkable speed and agility comparable to that of the series raptors. It can run at speeds of up to 40 kilometers an hour or 25 miles per hour and can take quick turns and high jumps. It also has the unique ability to change from a bipedal to quadrupedal stance. Now, the Indoraptor's bite force is not exactly known, but considering it shares genetic material with the Indominus rex, and given it cleanly severed a man's arm in the film, I think a reasonable estimate would be at least 8,000 newtons. The Indoraptor is no pushover, being able to easily lift and carry humans with little effort. Its body is built for tanking damage, with skin durable enough to withstand firearms without suffering damage, with a specific point of reinforcement being along its back. It also sustained multiple attacks from Blue throughout the film, yet showed no sign of serious injury. Beyond its physical strength, the Indoraptor's sensory capabilities make it a truly efficient predator. It is equipped with excellent vision, including the ability to see in the dark, which allows it to hunt effectively in low light conditions. It is also stated to have the ability to echolocate to further enhance its tracking capabilities, enabling it to locate prey even when visibility may be poor. Stealth is another key advantage, as its dark coloration allows it to blend seamlessly into the shadows. Whether it can actively camouflage itself like the Indominus rex remains a bit uncertain, as this ability is neither demonstrated in the films nor to my knowledge confirmed in official materials. Without clear evidence of one or the other, I'm just not going to include it into this analysis. And perhaps the Indoraptor's most terrifying trait is its intelligence. It should be around the level of the JP raptors, the Indominus rex, primates, and even dolphins, making it more than just a mindless predator. It has even been shown faking to faint into unconsciousness to lure a victim closer, being demonstrated to straight up smile. This creature exhibits curiosity, but this is often driven by malicious intent, being shown to be one of the most aggressive and violent dinosaurs throughout the franchise. Now, with all that in mind, how would the Indoraptor perform if placed in the real prehistoric world? To find out, we'll be examining 3 time periods: the Triassic, Jurassic, and of course, the Cretaceous. We'll be scoring its chances of survival in each area. Also, while I have typically averaged survival scores in past videos, it just makes more sense to total them up instead, so that's what I'll do. With all that being said, let's get started. The late Triassic was home to some of the most strangest fauna the world has ever seen. To showcase this, we'll be focusing on South America, specifically the Ugueto Formation. This region experienced a warm climate with seasonal fluctuations, maintaining an average temperature of approximately 25 degrees Celsius, or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Its diverse plant life included conifers, cycads, ferns, and ginkgos, thriving in well-watered floodplains and drier uplands. In this environment, the Indoraptor would likely perform pretty well. While not perfectly adapted for Triassic conditions, its design for war scenarios gives it a solid advantage. Overall, I'd rate its environmental adaptability as solid 8 out of 10. Now, when compared to its much larger counterpart, the Indoraptor was a much leaner predator, meaning its dietary needs would have been significantly reduced. While the majority of late Triassic prey animals were rather small, they were far more within the Indoraptor's preferred size range. Rather than just overlooking them, it would have likely relied on these more abundant, easily subduable targets. Now, these would have included your cynodons, smaller reptiles, and dinosaurs. Though they would not provide a massive feed, their availability made them a convenient prey option. With the Indoraptor's speed and intelligence, it would have little trouble ambushing these creatures and making them a main food source. Although there were still a couple of bigger prey options that were available. Issuegalastia would have been a prime target, being larger and hence a more rewarding prey option. This gigantic Dicertodon measured in at around 3.5 meters or 11.5 feet in length and would have weighed close to a ton. This was much bulkier than any of the other herbivores in the region. There was also Jercalaria, which would follow close to the Issuegalastia, clocking it at around 300 kilograms kilograms or 660 pounds. For the Indoraptor, these two would have been great prey options as they packed a lot of food on them while lacking the significant defenses that would be required to scare this predator off. Ultimately, the Indoraptor would be rather comfortable in this region, thus earning it a dietary score of 9 out of 10. When it comes to its competitors, this region was not overly stacked with heavy hitters. Torvosaurus was one of the earliest known theropod-like dinosaurs, measuring around 4 meters or 13 feet long and weighing in at approximately 200 kilograms or 440 pounds. It was fast, agile, primarily preying on the smaller herbivores and omnivores around. Though this was a relatively capable predator, its small size and limited strength would likely make it more of a snack than a true competitor. Saurosuchus was a large Rossuchian which measured around 5.5 meters to 7 meters or 18 to 23 feet in length and weighed around 590 kilograms or 1300 pounds. As a top apex predator of the late Triassic, Saurosuchus had the size and strength to take down most prey options. However, it was still smaller than the Indoraptor, and due to its anatomical build, it was less agile, meaning it would be facing quite a disadvantage. Being that the Indoraptor would be one of, if not the largest, fastest and smartest of predators of this region, it would receive a solid resistance to competition score of 9 out of 10. So, dropping the Indoraptor into the late Triassic would be an interesting test of its adaptability. Unlike the Jurassic or the Cretaceous, this world was still in transition, where true dinosaurs were only starting to take over. Here in the region of South America, the Indoraptor wouldn't be dealing with massive predators and towering giants of later periods. Instead, it would be navigating a stranger world. As it was designed to be a leaner, more tactical monster rather than the Indominus Rex, it wouldn't need constant high-calorie meals to sustain itself, and that is an absolutely great feature to have, as it wouldn't put too much pressure on the Indoraptor. The biggest herbivores in the area, being the Dicertodons, are bulky but slow, and they could feed the Indoraptor for a good while. Most likely, it would target weakened or isolated individuals rather than wasting energy trying to overpower a healthy adult. That said, the real advantage here is the abundance of smaller prey. Cynodons, early dinosaurs, and various reptiles littered this ecosystem, and while they wouldn't provide massive meals, their sheer numbers would more than make up for it. Although Saurosuchus is a bit of a wild card, the Indoraptor would win in a straight fight. I mean, when it comes down to it, the Indoraptor is superior to it in every single aspect. More likely than not, the Indoraptor would intimidate most of these predators outside of its territory. If they truly did engage in combat, we could imagine it would fight much like it did in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, where it would just leap at its target and absolutely dive into them. Over time, the Indoraptor would have to adapt its hunting patterns slightly, relying more on opportunistic prey and small game hunting rather than utilizing brute force. Through this, the Indoraptor gets an ultimate survival score of 26 out of 30. The Triassic seemed to have been a walk in the park. Time to see how the Indoraptor would perform when we get into the time where dinosaurs truly took over. Not only do we move time periods, but we move locations, moving from South America to North America. During the late Jurassic, the Morrison Formation was a vast, ecologically diverse region consisting of extensive floodplains, river valleys, and semi-arid landscapes with seasonal rainfall. The environment of course depended on the location specifically, with some areas being around 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit, but it could reach all the way up to 50 degrees Celsius or 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, it's difficult to say how the Indoraptor would perform considering we only saw it within the Lockwood Manor, but since it was designed for military purposes, I think it would be able to survive in the environment, and hence I provided a score of 7 out of 10. The Morrison Formation had been filled with many types of different dinosaurs. Of course, there were your less threatening and common ornithopods that populated the area, ones that would make an easy snack. There were also two rather underrated nodosaurs, with neither exceeding a ton in weight. Then we move on to the more popular stegosauroids such as Stegosaurus and Alcovosaurus, both capable of reaching 5 tons in weight, but with this size came the reduction of speed and agility. In a one-on-one encounter, I think that the Indoraptor wouldn't actually perform all that badly. It would likely be quick enough to move around from the dangerous tail and could easily aim the head. Whether or not it could easily take a stegosaurid down is up to debate, but I think it could certainly drive one off. However, if confronted with a large herd, the Indoraptor was more than smart enough to avoid direct confrontation and seek easier targets. Sauropods were by far the largest inhabitants of this ecosystem. Species such as Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, and the colossal Marapunosaurus dominated the landscape, with their weights ranging from 16 to 90 tons. Now, don't get me wrong, the Indoraptor is a capable hunter. However, even the Indoraptor would find it near impossible to bring down one of these behemoths. A single well-placed stomp, tail swipe, or trampling from a sauropod would end its reign of terror instantly. Although this location does offer a far more extensive selection of prey options, many of them significantly outweigh the Indoraptor and would likely be quite dangerous to take on. Still, there are a number of easier prey options to take advantage of, meaning it gets a solid dietary score of 7 out of 10. So, we already know how strong and adaptable the Indoraptor is. However, it is in the Jurassic where far larger competitors come into play. Carnivores such as the Saurosuchus would be an interesting bout, as their size was smaller or similar to the Indoraptor, yet they lacked the advanced features which it possessed. However, it was the larger theropods that possessed the true difficulty. Allosaurus fragilis, the most well-documented predator of the Morrison Formation, averaged around 8.5 meters or 28 feet in length and weighing between 1.7 to 2.7 tons. With a bite force of 9,389 newtons and highly serrated teeth, it could inflict significant wounds. An even greater threat in this area would be Allosaurus anax, the largest predator of this location. This carnivore reached around 12.1 meters or 40 feet in length and weighed up to 6.5 tons. Torvosaurus tanneri measured up to 9 meters or 30 feet in length and weighed up to 5.2 tons. These two theropods would have been the dominating forces. Though the Indoraptor is an imposing predator, the Jurassic landscape of the Morrison Formation was no easy hunting ground. Survival would have been dependent on not just strength, but strategy, patience, and the ability to evade unfavorable forces that ruled the land. This would provide a resistance to competition score of 6 out of 10. It would perform well, but it was significantly outsized by many of the inhabitants. Now it's time to see how it will do. The Jurassic period presents an entirely new set of challenges for the Indoraptor as it finds itself in the semi-arid landscape of the Morrison Formation. It would quickly get used to this environment. Being that it adapted to a mansion, I think the outside would be a-okay. The smaller ornithopods like the Triassic would be the easiest of targets, offering minimal resistance and high availability. These types of prey options would just be like going through a drive-thru. When it comes to the Stegosauroids, their formidable weaponry would likely make the Indoraptor second think. However, if the Indoraptor was desperate, I could imagine it would wait until nightfall. It would use its more advanced physiology to take advantage of the poorer Stegosaurid. It would likely utilize hit and run techniques, using its metal slicing claws to tear into the Stegosaurus, slowly weakening it over time until it would eventually drop for good. The true giants of the Morrison Formation, the sauropods, would nearly be untouchable. They all relied on the immense size to act as their primary defense. Even with all of its capabilities, the Indoraptor would recognize that confrontation would spell doom. It lacks the venom of the Scorpius rex and doesn't have the size of the Indominus rex. Instead, it would likely resort on scavenging of carcasses or opportunistic predation on juvenile or injured individuals. But even if it took over a carcass or was successful in hunting, it would still have to deal with the competition. Predators like Ceratosaurus may be similarly sized, but they weren't even close to being comparable. We saw the less developed Scorpius rex easily take down a Jurassic World Ceratosaur, so I think the Indoraptor would find it even easier to take it on, even if it was in a head-on confrontation. I believe although Allosaurus fragilis is threatening, it lacked a significant enough size advantage to be able to bully the Indoraptor. Instead, I could imagine the Indoraptor ambushing this species of Allosaur, jumping on it with its full body weight, and just absolutely tearing into the theropod until it won the conflict. It would also take down young Allosaur anaxes and Torvosaurus in order to reduce the overall competition. But an adult Allosaurus anax or Torvosaurus would be a legitimate mega theropod. I think as a result of their size, they present too big of a risk to be worthwhile. The Indoraptor may like to hunt, but it had never seen a carnivore nearly close to that size. In order to survive in this ecosystem, the Indoraptor would likely resort to nocturnal hunting patterns, minimizing the interactions with the dominant predators. By striking individuals in the cover of darkness, it could carve out a niche that avoids direct competition with the Jurassic's established megatheropods. The Indoraptor's advanced cognition allows it to recognize and avoid unnecessary risks. Although it wouldn't be the largest predator in the region, I would argue it would be the most effective, thriving in the shadows, being an unseen calculated threat navigating the perilous Jurassic environment. This would earn the Indoraptor an ultimate survival score of 20 out of 30. Now we move on to the final challenge, this being the Cretaceous. And although we're normally used to moving into the Hell's Creek Formation, today we're going to be looking into Mongolia and China, specifically the Nemegt Formation. Sorry if I butchered that. This environment was quite different from the arid conditions of the modern Gobi Desert. It presented large river channels, floodplains, and soil deposits, which suggested a far more humid climate with seasonal variations. The presence of many crocodilians also suggests that these rivers and lakes were relatively stable. Again, considering the Indoraptor was designed to survive through intense ecosystems, it would be able to survive this environment, earning an environmental score of 8 out of 10. But what type of creatures would be on the menu for the Indoraptor? Well, lucky for this predator, there were a number of different dinosaurs that called this place home. The place was filled with a number of ornithopods, including the classic Gallimimus. It also consisted of a number of different pachycephalosaurids, ankylosaurids, hadrosaurs, and sauropods. But I will be focusing on the most popular of the bunch. The Tarchia was a heavily armored ankylosaurid that possessed the classic clubbed tail that, although was mainly utilized for intraspecific conflicts, could be utilized against predators. It measured around 6 meters or 20 feet in length and weighed in at approximately 3 tons. As a low-browsing herbivore, it likely would have fed on ferns, cycads, and other tough vegetation. There was also the Saurosuchus, which was a large duck-billed hadrosaur with a backwards pointing crest. It grew to around 12 meters or 39 feet long and stood at around 4 meters or 13 feet at the hips. Its high estimates even place it around 10 tons in weight, clearly one of the largest non-sauropod dinosaurs in this area. Then we move on to my personal favourite, Deinocheirus. This was an enormous theropod that was likely an omnivore, primarily feeding on plants but also fish on occasion. It reached around 11 meters or 36 feet in length, stood over 3.5 meters or 11.5 feet tall at the hips, and weighed in at around 6.5 tons. The most famous feature of this theropod, other than being a giant duck or goose, was its gigantic claws. These could do some real damage if the Indoraptor was not careful. We also have the pretty similar but different Therizinosaurus, a high-browsing herbivore that had the largest claws of any other theropod. It grew around 9 meters or 29 feet in length and stood at around 4 meters or 13 feet in height. Its weight clocked in at around 5 tons, so clearly it was a large theropod. But all I'm going to say for now is don't let those oversized claws fool you. They might have looked dangerous, but I want you to truly question how effective they were. The final herbivore that I'll be covering is Nemegtosaurus, arguably the most famous sauropod of this formation. It measured around 12 meters or 39 feet in length and could weigh in anywhere from 10 to 20 tons. And let's be honest, I don't think that the Indoraptor would want to have any issues with this sauropod. But clearly there are a number of different potential prey options for the Indoraptor to take on. However, many more would have been of high risk. It is for this reason that I think it has a dietary score of 7 out of 10. With many herbivores comes many carnivores, and with the first one on our list, we have Adaptosaurus, which was a small dromaeosaurid that of course had the classic raptor sickle claw on each foot. This was likely utilized to hunt down smaller prey options, as it measured around 3 meters or 9.8 feet in length, stood at around 0.7 meters or 2.3 feet at the hips, and weighed in at approximately 80 kilograms with the higher end estimations. Let's be real, this one wouldn't be too much of an issue. Then we have Alioramus, which was a medium-sized tyrannosaurid which had a long slender snout filled with a number of teeth. This was likely more capable of hunting down smaller to medium-sized game. It grew around 5.5 meters or 18 feet in length and weighed in at around 500 kilograms or 1100 pounds. Although it could get a nasty bite on the Indoraptor, it was still half its weight, meaning that it could get easily overpowered. Then we have the final predator, the apex Tarbosaurus. This megatheropod reached lengths of around 10 meters or 33 feet, stood at around 3 meters or 9.8 feet at the hips, and weighed in at around 5.5 tons. Of course, being a close relative to the T-Rex, it had a massive skull with some potent jaws. These jaws were capable of producing an interior biforce of 13,000 newtons and had a posterior biforce of 24,000 newtons. The majority of the other carnivores would not have been overly difficult to overcome, especially for something as large and capable as the Indoraptor. Now, since the Tarbosaurus does exist, it knocks off a couple points, but I still think it has a resistance to competition score of 8 out of 10. At worst, it would run away. The arrival of the Indoraptor into this ecosystem would undoubtedly shift the balance. Designed for adaptability and survivability in harsh conditions, the Indoraptor would swiftly find ways to integrate itself into the environment. Unlike the native apex predator Tarbosaurus, which could rely on its brute strength and powerful bite force, the Indoraptor would have to leverage its heightened intelligence, speed, and stealth. It would likely adopt a flexible diet, being capable of ambush attacks and high-speed pursuits. This would make it an unpredictable force within the ecosystem. Its semi-pronated hands would grant it an advantage over other theropods, as it would allow it to grasp and manipulate prey as well as objects with a dexterity unseen in its contemporaries. The floodplain would provide ample prey, where I think the Indoraptor would likely take a liking to the Gallimimus, being a prey option that didn't have too much defense while still weighing half its own weight. I don't really believe that the Indoraptor would try go up against the adult hadrosaurs, but subduing juveniles or weakened individuals would be extremely viable. Likewise, the Indoraptor would have to be cautious around Therizinosaurus, whose gigantic claws would have been quite intimidating. However, the latest studies actually suggest that their claws were rather fragile. If the Indoraptor was able to work work this out, then it could be a potential prey option. If the Indoraptor jumped from the darkness and landed on its neck, I think the fight would end before it even started. The ankylosaurid tarsia would likely be safe, as it was heavily armoured and not really worth the hassle. However, it could be something that the Indoraptor would have fun playing with. I mean, we did see it enjoy playing around with humans, so a giant meatball that would likely not have been all that fast and all that agile could be quite a source for entertainment. I believe that unsurprisingly, sauropods would be off the menu due to the risk of injury, as would Dinochirus. The reason I think Dinochirus would pose such a threat is the fact that it likely resided around water sources, which would mean that if the Indoraptor would attempt to hunt it, it would be facing it while being within a disadvantaged terrain. There would be too many risks without too many rewards. As mentioned, the Indoraptor did not have any experience nor was necessarily designed to take on larger theropods. Hence, I think it would avoid direct confrontations with Tarbosaurus. And although the Tarbosaurus would not have been as intelligent as the Indoraptor, I think it would be able to comprehend that there would be too much of a risk to even attempt to take it down. I mean, unless either one was desperate, I don't necessarily see anything unfolding. If the Tarbosaurus was able to surprise the Indoraptor, then it could wrap its jaws around it and get an easy victory. However, if it's in any other situation, the Indoraptor would either use its superior speed to run off, or it would engage in conflict with the Tarbosaurus. Even if the Tarbosaurus won the conflict, it would likely end up succumbing to its injuries. Although one could argue a rivalry could emerge, I think that the Indoraptor would be smart enough to leave the Tarbosaurus alone, and to be fair, the Tarbosaurus would likely take on far larger prey options, meaning there shouldn't be too much overlap. The smaller theropods such as the dromaeosaurids would of course not really pose a significant threat. However, they could act like scavengers, stealing scraps from the Indoraptor's carcasses. And the Uranus, a more direct competitor, would have occupied a similar niche, with the singular Indoraptor being the dominant predator due to being superior to the Alioramus in every sense. And again, the Indoraptor's nocturnal superiority would give it an edge in avoiding most competition and threats. With current research showing that Tyrannosaurids were primarily active during the day, the Indoraptor could easily hunt during nightfall, utilizing its natural camouflage to the fullest extent. With that, the Indoraptor's ultimate survival score tallies up to 22 out of 30, a very strong score for the amount of large dinosaurs that called the place home. So, after analysing the Indoraptor's potential to survive in each of these time periods, we can see that it fares quite well. Its worst performance seems to be within the Jurassic, which makes sense that it had a large number of well-armed herbivores and carnivores alike. Still, 20 out of 30 is a pretty good score for being its worst. Then in second best, we have the Cretaceous, where it scored a solid 22 out of 30. Finally, we have the Indoraptor's best score being 26 out of 30 within the Triassic. To me, that makes sense as there were decently sized herbivores and carnivores that it could prey upon. And with that, we've reached the end of the video and I hope you've all enjoyed. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe as well as comment down below what you'd like to see next. I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya.